What do you mean you don't have hot sauce? This is Texas. We put Tabasco on cornflakes. You can play it safe if you want to, but you gotta risk it to get that biscuit. When it comes to business, you gotta look out for the cookout. That's how we do it in Texas. What do you mean my accent is too southern? Well, we're fixing to get it on Solve for X. Welcome to Solve for X, the podcast where curiosity meets collaboration. I'm Dr. Rick Fernandez, your host on this journey into the heart of education and innovation. Welcome back to another episode of Solve for X. We're here in my hometown of Houston, Texas, and I have a proud Houstonian for my guest. Shout out to Spring Branch ISD, Dr. Jennifer Blaine.
That's right.
Springwoods Tiger.
Springwoods Tiger.
Max Rombado from Raise Your Hand Texas, the legislative director, correct?
Yes, sir.
And Raise Your Hand Texas does what for our schools?
Raise Your Hand Texas is a pro-public education advocacy organization. We spend a lot of time in the Capitol supporting pro-public education policies. And we spend a lot of time in communities across the state of Texas helping Texans understand the importance of public education and how they can advocate for public schools.
So as the legislative director, what is your role specifically and how do you support the overall mission?
Yeah, well, if you've seen the movie Barbie, they say Ken's job is beach,
Okay.
Max's job is Capitol. I spend all the time in the Capitol talking with legislative offices, with legislative members, helping them understand key legislation that affects school funding, that affects school accountability. So we've seen in the media a lot over the last couple of years, the A through F system and how that's affecting schools. Yeah, just a little bit. And teacher workforce issues too, right? How can we keep, attract, and retain high quality educators in the state of Texas?
So, I mean, yeah, this has been a monumental legislative session. Obviously, you know that. But for those that may not keep tabs like we do, can you give us a general overall feel of the past legislative session, some of the big ticket items that were passed, and then we'll get into the more of the details a little bit later on.
Yeah, it's hard to talk about this session without talking about the previous session.
Sure.
It's kind of a sequel to what happened back in 2023. But the big issues were school funding, school choice, and school accountability. Those don't cover nearly all the issues that got addressed over the legislative session, but those are the big key items. The governor at the beginning of the legislative session made both teacher raises and school choice his major issues on education. Both the House Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor on the Senate side made education policy their priorities as well. So we saw sort of cohesion across the main legislative leaders to address public education through legislation. So yeah, school funding, accountability, and school choice.
So if you're looking at House Bill 2, can we talk a little bit and maybe break apart some of those big ticket items and dive in a little bit more? And I'll let you pick because you're the expert.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we could spend hours talking just about HB2. It's a 250-page bill with all kinds of different programming changes and funding changes.
Yes.
But the big items really are, how would we secure across the board teacher pay raises? The bill kind of takes a couple approaches to that. The first thing that it does is it creates a new allotment called the teacher retention allotment. This is meant to provide across the board teacher pay raises, separate from, and I'll get into this in a second, the teacher incentive allotment, which we've had for a few years now. This is a new separate allotment, not based on that. And it's kind of broken up into two categories that determine how much a teacher would get in the next school year and moving forward. You have your school districts that have 5,000 students or more, and then you have your school districts with less than 5,000 students. Those are your two categories. In the larger school districts with 5,000 students or more, your salary increase is broken up between $2,500 more than what you were making in the previous school year if you're a teacher with 3 to 4 years of experience. It goes up to about $4,000 if you are a teacher with more than 5 years of experience. And then if you're a school district with less than 5,000 students, a smaller, mid-size or smaller school district, your salary bumps go up a little more. So you start at $4,000 and go to $8,000 based on your experience.
Okay.
So that's the teacher retention allotment. These are ongoing pay raises. So the teachers have to demonstrate in the reporting that they saw that increase from their previous year.
Right.
There's no supplementing, so it's supplanting. So it's not like you get this pay raise and we kind of reduce what you were making last time.
Right.
It has to show a net gain over time. And it's ongoing. So that pay raise will be sustained unless the legislature decides to make changes to the retention allotment.
So do you recall the amount of the chunk of change that was allocated for the school districts and some of the rules and regulations around how that is spent? They use it for other things besides teachers? How's that structured?
The teacher retention allotment is specifically for teacher pay raises. That's what it's for, and it's divided in the way we just talked about. That with the teacher incentive allotment combined, the increases are about $4 billion to public education. So half of the entire cost of HB2, which is about $8.5 billion, is going straight to teacher compensation, primarily through the teacher retention allotment. But they've also increased the teacher incentive allotment. And what they did there is that they've expanded the tiers. So, since 2019, we've had 3 tiers in the teacher incentive allotment. Right. We've created a new tier in the bill, which is like a base tier called the acknowledged tier. And then we've bumped the amount of money that each tier that was already existing would get. So altogether, the TIA, teacher incentive allotment, and the TRA, teacher retention allotment, created about $4 billion more for teachers.
Now, as you're hearing and you're seeing the process kind of play out, I'm going to ask you to kind of project, how do you think districts are internalizing, reacting, just based on your knowledge of the policy and then what you've kind of heard? And I know I'm asking you to predict, so I'm not holding you to it, but just from what you've heard.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, timing, I think, is the biggest thing, right? School districts have to plan their budgets ahead of time. That includes how much their teachers are going to make. Right. And so I'm certain school districts have to think about amending their budget plans with this bill coming into play to reassess how much school districts are going to give their teachers and make sure everyone's got their numbers correct.
Right.
So I think the biggest challenge there is getting the timing right, going through the process of finalizing your budget to incorporate these pay raises, because they do take into effect this school year.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, what other pieces of HB2 are significant that are probably changing some ways, things that school districts have to
Absolutely. Do? The kind of other new allotment that was created is called the allotment for basic costs. They call it the ABC allotment. This is supposed to be your kind of bread and butter funding for all your operational needs that are not related to salary. So we've spent, raise your hand Texas, but really, the education community overall has spent so much time talking about the basic allotment, which is the building block of our school funding system. Right. It's sort of the universal entitlement that every child generates for school districts when they attend that school district. Right. Of course, you have other characteristics that bump up that number, but there's been a constant debate over the last few years about whether the solution for school funding is increasing the basic allotment, which then affects all other funding streams for schools, or do we create more targeted allotments that serve as sort of like categorical programs where the legislature can increase funding but provide, kind of more regulation around how that money can be spent. And we're seeing that trend go that way right now. So, the legislature could have increased the basic allotment. Sure. They did by about $55. That doesn't substantially change the financial situation for school districts. What they did instead is direct most of that money to allotments that have these sort of regulations. One of those being the ABC allotment, the basic costs allotment. And those are for fundings that have to do with like transportation, funding that has to do with instructional materials, the things that help the school districts operate day to day.
Right.
And one thing that allows the state to do moving forward is actually calculate how much money is being given to school districts for operational costs. And then school districts can help compare and contrast, basically, is that enough to truly, meet those costs, or do we need to
I don't know that that new money, because inflation has just been, astronomical in the last 5 to COVID and moving forward. I don't know that anything that was done substantially changes the ability for a school district to add resources, to be more flexible. Right. And I'm not going to speak for any of the other superintendents, but just talking to some friends, they weren't overly thrilled with the amount, for the basic allotment, but there will be a little bit of relief. Yeah. What's the feel? Does legislature feel like, okay, we've done a marvelous job to fund our public schools, or was it the bare minimum? What's kind of the feel of the legislators as they pass this?
I will say the way the legislature is built, the way if you've seen the Schoolhouse Rock music video, that just scratches the surface about all the levels and obstacles it takes to get a bill passed.
Okay.
So, passing an $8 billion piece of school funding legislation, especially from a legislator's perspective, is no small task. Right. You have to have so many conversations internally, so many conversations with your superintendents and your communities to even have a shot at getting that bill through. And when you have a 5-month window to pass something this big, it is truly challenging. So there is some merit, right, to the nature of what it takes to pass this.
Yes.
But you're right. In 2019, we passed major school funding, and 6 months later, we were in a global pandemic, and the resulting inflation has been crippling, right?
Yeah.
Double-digit inflation since that time. All the money we invested in public education in 2019 virtually disappeared in terms of purchasing power, right? We still need, about $1,000 more per kid for school districts to get back to where they were in 2019 when you take inflation into account. When you calculate that across the board, that's like $20 billion that our school districts need to avoid having to lay teachers off, to avoid having to cut programs, to avoid cutting, closing campuses, yeah, exactly.
Fine
traveling,
arts, athletics, all of the things.
all of these things, right? And so $8 billion, while it's definitely no easy feat for a legislative body, we are far away from where we need to be just to catch up to where we were in 2019. And if Texas has the goal of being 25th in the nation, average, in how much we spend per kid, we need $40 billion. And so we've got a long way to go in this conversation for school funding moving forward.
Switching to teachers really quickly, is there anything with certifications? I was reading a little bit about the District of Innovation and using some of those things to be flexible with how you hire and meet the needs of your students. What has come down from certification standpoint? Is it more flexible, less flexible? Do we see some of the decisions exacerbating the teacher shortages? Just from your perspective on just recruiting like new teachers.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I think, we saw unprecedented numbers of uncertified teachers being hired across the state over the last couple of years. And, I don't think I think it's not correct to antagonize these folks. I think these folks are stepping up to serve kids at a time where it's difficult.
Right.
But it does create challenges, right? We know that our uncertified teaching population typically don't stay in the classroom for that much long of time.
Right.
Take longer to, build the skills to master the craft and serve their students appropriately. And it takes resources and time away from administrators and other teachers who also have to support these educators. So we see this being a very complex issue. And the legislature took an approach to try to support through funding grants, getting folks into preparation programs and providing additional funding for educators who are certified, and they're tiered. So, you get more resources and more funding if your school district has more teachers that are certified through a 4-year college program or who have national certification, less so if they've gone to alternative, and really no financial reward if you haven't gotten a certification, but could receive financial support if you do get certified, in a short period of time.
Trying to provide incentive pathways for people to get certified. And a push to the districts like, hey, if you can get them certified,
right.
then there's
avenues here for support. The other challenge, though, is that in House Bill 2, there is language there that basically says moving forward, school districts have to start reducing the percentage of teachers that are teaching core subjects, math, reading, social sciences, and sciences, that are not certified, right? And over a period of about 5 years, I believe, they got to wind it down to like no more than 5 or 10% of your teaching population cannot be certified.
And I foresee that being a huge challenge
absolutely
in the coming years, because we're already struggling to find highly qualified teachers.
Yeah.
And, teaching is not a popular profession out amongst the young people, right?
One of the data points I don't hear talked about enough is that SAT, the test that's one of the tests students take to determine college readiness and to get into college, also surveys their students and asks them what college pathways are they interested in when they get into college. And over the last 10 years, that number hasn't increased past 3%. 3% of the students taking the SAT are not reporting teachers as a pathway that they'd like to go through.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a little scary.
Right.
What other big pieces, big rocks came down from the legislative session that we need to hit on? We need to get out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the legislature didn't end during the regular special session.
Seems like it never does, but
no,
that's beside the point.
That's right. So we had 2 special sessions. We just wrapped up the second one, and in that special session, the legislature passed House Bill 8. This is the school accountability legislation, the school standardized testing legislation. And the goal of the legislation was to create or reform the way we test our students and to strengthen the way we evaluate school quality. This was a long and complicated conversation There are a lot of interests at the table when it comes to exactly when it comes to determining, what makes the school great and how do we capture that in our A through F system. That system is important not just to school districts and students, it's important to families and future families, right? When you're deciding to buy a home and start a family.
Real estate, yeah,
it's huge.
Realtors, yes.
Exactly. And so the A through F system plays a role in big life decisions too. It's very important that the state and our school systems get that right and make sure that when we're evaluating our schools, we're doing that well. HB8 took a first stab at that for the first time in quite a while. And what it does overall, I'll give you the cliff notes of the bill first, and we can talk about any of the aspects you're interested in, is it changes what we know as the STAAR test to the student success tool. We had the tax and then we went to STAAR, which got some creative points. I think we've kind of regressed a bit here, but student success tool, and what it is it's no longer just one test on one day, it's 3 tests, a beginning, a middle, and an end of year test.
A more accurate prediction as opposed to an autopsy.
Correct. Summative. Yeah. The formal terms we use are summative and formative. Your summative test is one test one day, the end of the school year. Formative is supposed to be through year, and it assesses the student over time to see how they've grown from period A to period Z. And so in elementary and middle school grades, schools will be required to do a beginning, middle, and end of year test. For high school, they have the option to do beginning and middle of the year tests with their end of course exams, but they don't have to do that. So we have now a 3-test system starting in the 26th school year. But that's not the only thing that the bill does. It also reduced the number of required end of course exams by 1. So instead of having 5 required EOCs, we have 4. The one that got kind of taken off is English 2. There was a conversation about removing others that didn't ultimately come to fruition. So English 2 is the only other one that we've taken out. But yeah, so it's and then the conversation, is not just about what the test looks like, but how does it affect the A through F system?
Yes.
Right. And so as the bill is written, of the 3 tests, the only test that affects the A through F system is the last test.
That's a very important distinction there.
Correct.
So there's still a lot of weight on that one day in time.
Yes.
Okay.
It's hard to argue that we are no longer, as far as the accountability system works, going past this one test, one day
well,
system.
if that's how you're rated, that you're still
right.
That's still your shot in time of
right.
Hope it goes well today.
Right. And the reality is a lot of school districts are using beginning and middle of the year assessments already.
Most I don't know any that are not
Correct.
using a pulse to get
how their students are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Is learning occurring? Are we growing? Are we setting ourselves up for success in that day and time? Now, I know I'm taking up a lot of time. No. I want to end on something that you and I talked about. You brought up some points that I was blown away by. When we're talking school choice, we know that the education savings account, vouchers, however you want to say it, passed. We had a discussion about what are some of the effects that might cause.
Sure.
Like, just from your perspective, how do you see that playing out?
I knew you weren't going to let me off the hook.
Because that was so interesting. That was so interesting. So, and again, this is your own opinion. I'm not holding you to this, but
sure.
Just from your perspective.
Yeah, this is the first time in Texas history that the Texas legislature has passed school choice legislation. They have tried for over 20 years to do this. Texas was sort of the last large Republican state to hold out on this issue because so many communities across the state depend on their public schools and trust their public schools. And so it's been really difficult for the legislature to pass this. They finally did this last legislative session. The way the bill, it's Senate Bill 2, is designed is it creates these education savings accounts that parents can gain access to.
Sure.
Money is provided through those accounts, and then there's a list of eligible expenses that they can use that money for. That money is basically about 85% of what the average daily attendance of a student generates for school district. That puts it just north of about $10,000 per kid who is using that money specifically to attend private schools, right, for private school tuition. If you're a homeschool student, you do qualify for funding through this program, but you're limited to $2,000 or $2,500 if you're a student with special education needs. But for private school tuition, you get upwards north of $10,000 for this funding. The way the program is designed is to be universal in access. Mm-hmm. So all students, whether as long as you're eligible for pre-K and up, can apply for this program. It doesn't matter if you've been in public schools your whole life, or if you've been in private schools your whole life, doesn't matter if you're in the wealthiest tax bracket or the lowest tax bracket, you can apply. There is a prioritization aspect about who gets kind of first dibs on the funding. It starts off with students with special education needs who are below the 200% federal poverty line. And then it goes up based on the federal poverty line of the students. And then the final kind of tier is if you're a student above the 500% poverty line, meaning that in a family of four, your family makes over $160,000 a year. Many of those students already attend and can afford private schools. While they can still apply, only 20% of the funding allocated in this program can go to those students.
Gotcha.
And the bill is designed to have about a $1 billion funding mark.
Gotcha. And so how do you think charters and privates are adjusting as now this is passed? Any speculation there?
Yeah, well, I think there are private schools who are certainly interested in using these funding streams to get more students to enroll in their programs and to provide students that choice to attend their schools. I believe charter schools in Texas are public schools, so they get funding on an ADA basis, the way public schools or traditional public schools do. That makes them immediately ineligible to be a recipient of ESA funding unless they are to privatize. And so I think there are certainly charter schools out there who are having that conversation and thinking about what might make the most financial sense for them. Is it to continue receiving ADA funding from the state or to privatize?
Very interesting.
Right, it is very interesting. It's something to keep an eye out. It could create a whole new sort of space for this sort of intermediary organization. And whether or not they can split, that's something to be seen. But there's all kinds of technical aspects of this bill that are yet to be really fleshed out, and we'll see that in
people are trying to see where they best leverage new legislation.
All of the funding available. Correct.
Excellent.
Correct.
Max, man, I can't thank you enough for joining us, and it's amazing to hear somebody, no offense, young guy this interested in policy. A lot of it puts people to sleep, man, but you had the pulse and sharing all the nuggets, man, and a Houstonian Springwoods High.
That's right. That's right.
So I'm just going to volunteer. Like, here's your keynote speaker for graduation at Springwoods High School, right there. So, man,
I'd love to. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me on Solve for X. And if people want to know more about Raise Your Hand Texas, how do they get in contact?
We have an incredible website, www.raiseyourhandtexas.org. We have all kinds of resources, informational. We have a newsletter to follow where we post occasional or frequent updates on what's going on in the legislature, what's going on, in communities related to public education. We have a system of regional advocacy directors who work across the state of Texas.
I can tell you they're fantastic.
They are absolute ballers at the work that they do.
Yes.
And if you're interested in getting involved in advocacy for public education, you can go on our website, find out which regional advocacy directors in your community, connect with them, get involved. We are always looking to increase and strengthen our people power because more Texans need to start talking about public education. We say all the time the future of Texas is in our public schools.
Absolutely.
And we all need to be invested in that work.
Well said. I think we'll end it on that. Thank you for joining us on Solve for X. Thanks for joining us on Solve for X. Please follow, like, and subscribe for more episodes. And until next time, keep asking the right questions and solving for X.